Comparative analysis of two synchronized topological trajectories of pathophysiological evolution, number 1683, BPT 133, June 13, 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category: Mortality diseases. Preface for readers: eat more protein and vegetables. Eat less red meat and processed food. Reduce portions if overweight. Eating a little less will not hurt you, overeating for yours will. Exercise daily. Walk at least 7,000 to 8,000 steps. Drink 85 to 100 ounces to 0.5 to 3.0 liters of water daily. Sleep 6 to 7 hours each night. Manage stress. Avoid draining people and unnecessary conflicts. Put your health first. Wealth, fame, and power mean little without health and life. Preface: this paper marks a distinct and unique milestone in my ongoing longitudinal medical research. 4 years. My analysis of chronic diseases has relied heavily on the viscoelasticity and viscoplasticity theories borrowed from physics and engineering to model energy generation and organ tissue damage. In this study, however, I have completely departed from that familiar framework. Instead, I have utilized pure topology, a branch of advanced mathematics, to analyze the system's behavior through multi-dimensional geometric changes over time. By constructing two independent three-dimensional manifolds, the hidden architecture of my health data revealed something extraordinary. Both the upstream physiological state space, glucose, pulse pressure, and systolic blood pressure, and the downstream disease response space, NU-TSI, stroke, cardiovascular disease risk, and chronic kidney disease risk, map out continuous paths that converge onto the exact same topological pivot point, the second quarter of 2025, precisely when I suffered a hemorrhagic stroke. Discovering that these separate biological dimensions are dynamically coupled and synchronized through geometric space has been a profoundly rewarding revelation. Standing at this unique analytical angle and uncovering such precise, systemic insights is an achievement I am deeply proud of. It proves that the human body does not merely produce isolated clinical snapshots, but rather moves along a highly organized, mathematically profound trajectory, a continuous movie of physiological evolution. Introduction. The purpose of this study is not to examine individual biomarkers in isolation, but to explore how multiple physiological variables evolve together as three-dimensional trajectories through each time. To accomplish this, I constructed and compared two independent 3D topological diagrams from quarterly longitudinal data. The first diagram uses glucose, pulse pressure pp, and systolic blood pressure SPP to represent the upstream physiological state of the system. The second diagram uses NU-TSI, cardiovascular disease CVD, and chronic kidney disease CKD to represent downstream health outcomes derived from those physiological conditions. Although the two diagrams are constructed from different variables, they exhibit remarkably similar geometric behavior. Both form continuous trajectories rather than random point clouds, and both display an identical turning point around 2025Q2. The synchronized appearance of this pivot suggests that the two manifolds are not independent but instead represent different projections of the same underlying physiological evolution. The significance of this observation extends beyond any single biomarker. Traditional medical analysis often evaluates glucose, blood pressure, cardiovascular risk, or kidney disease separately. In contrast, the present work emphasizes the relationships among variables and the geometry of their collective evolution. The trajectory itself becomes the object of study. # coupled three-dimensional trajectories. The first 3D diagram, constructed from glucose, PP, and SPP, should not be viewed simply as a scatter plot. Instead, it represents the movement of the physiological system through a multidimensional state space over time. The quarterly data points connect naturally into a continuous trajectory, revealing that these variables evolve together rather than independently. The second 3D diagram, constructed from NU-TSI CVD and CKD, exhibits the same behavior. Instead of randomly distributed observations, the points follow a coherent path that reflects the integrated evolution of downstream health status. The existence of two organized trajectories immediately suggests that physiology is better represented as motion through multidimensional space than as isolated measurements obtained at separate points in time. The common pivot at 2025Q2. The most striking observation is that both trajectories undergo a synchronized topological pivot around 2025Q2 within the glucose PPSBP manifold. The trajectory remains relatively confined before this period, and then abruptly changes direction afterward. Similarly, the new TSICVDCKD manifold follows one path before 2025Q2 and then branches into a distinctly different direction after that quarter. The coincidence of these two independent pivots is unlikely to be accidental. Instead, it suggests that both manifolds are responding to the same underlying physiological transition. Equally important, the trajectories do not retrace their original paths. The post-2025Q2 branch follows a new route through state space, indicating that the system has reorganized rather than simply returned to its previous condition. Evidence for topological reorganization. The geometry of both manifolds demonstrates characteristics that cannot be explained by simple linear relationships. The trajectories twist and branch through three-dimensional space instead of lying on a straight line or flat surface. Similar coordinate values can correspond to very different physiological states depending on where they occur along the trajectory. This path dependence resembles hysteresis in physical systems, where the current state depends not only on present measurements but also on the history of the system. The observations therefore suggest that biological evolution possesses memory. Health cannot be completely described by individual variables alone because the trajectory itself contains additional information. Synchronization between the two manifolds. Perhaps the most remarkable finding is that the two independently constructed manifolds appear to evolve in synchrony. The glucose BPSBP trajectory represents upstream physiological conditions, whereas the new TSICVDCKD trajectory represents downstream health outcomes. Despite describing different aspects of the biological system, both undergo their major geometric transition at precisely the same period. This synchronization suggests that the two manifolds are coupled rather than independent. One may be viewed as each physiological state space, while the other represents the corresponding response space generated by that state. Such coupling implies that health and disease evolve as coordinated multidimensional processes rather than isolated events. The stroke as a marker of the pivot. The hemorrhagic stroke occurred near the observed transition and therefore serves as a natural temporal marker for the pivot. However, the geometric evidence suggests that the stroke itself should not be interpreted as the sole cause of the new trajectory. Instead, it marks the beginning of a different phase of physiological evolution. Following the event, continuous monitoring through the TSI stroke framework and disciplined management of glucose and blood pressure redirected the system along a new path. The trajectory after 2025Q2 therefore reflects not only the neurological event but also the sustained feedback-driven intervention that followed. In this sense, the stroke was the wake-up call, while the TSI stroke model became the steering mechanism that guided subsequent evolution. A new perspective on physiological evolution. The comparison of these two 3D manifolds suggests that health should be viewed as movement through multidimensional state space rather than as isolated measurements of independent biomarkers. The synchronized pivot demonstrates that upstream physiological variables and downstream disease indices evolve together as coupled trajectories. The geometry of these trajectories reveals features including continuity, branching, hysteresis, and reorganization that cannot be appreciated through conventional two-dimensional analysis. Most importantly, the paired manifolds indicate that physiological evolution is not merely a sequence of numerical values but a structured path whose shape carries biological meaning. Conclusion. The principal finding of this study is not the value of any single biomarker but the discovery that two independently constructed three-dimensional trajectories exhibit the same topological pivot at 2025Q2. One manifold describes the evolution of glucose, pulse pressure, and systolic blood pressure. The other describes the evolution of new TSI, cardiovascular disease risk, and chronic kidney disease risk. Their synchronized transition strongly suggests that physiological regulation and disease progression are coupled manifestations of the same underlying dynamical system, rather than viewing health as a collection of disconnected measurements. These observations support a topological perspective in which biological processes evolve continuously through multidimensional space. The trajectory itself becomes an important source of information, revealing organization, memory, and structural transitions that remain hidden when variables are examined individually. Ultimately, the paired 3D manifolds reinforce a simple but profound principle: life is not a snapshot but a continuously evolving movie, and understanding its trajectory may be as important as measuring its individual frames. Epilogue. This study began as a simple attempt to visualize long-term health data but ultimately revealed something unexpected: two independently constructed three-dimensional trajectories, built from different physiological variables, exhibited the same topological pivot at the same point in time. Whether this observation represents a universal biological principle remains for future research to determine. However, it demonstrates that comparing trajectories may reveal relationships that remain invisible when individual biomarkers are examined separately. Perhaps the greatest lesson is that health is not defined by isolated numbers but by the direction and shape of its evolution. Life is not a snapshot. Life is a movie. Curiosity is the seed of knowledge. Knowledge drives adaptation. Adaptation is the foundation of survivability. After notes, a note on methodology and human-AI collaboration preparation and editing of this paper represent a unique collaboration between natural intelligence and artificial intelligence AI, born out of physical necessity. Following recent cataract operations, and compounded by advanced macular degeneration and retinopathy, my severely strained eyesight made traditional reading and text editing nearly impossible. However, while my vision was impaired, my auditory perception remained completely intact, and my post-stroke cognitive capabilities experienced a profound documented surge, increasing my capacity for conceptualization and structure. To bypass the visual bottleneck without slowing the pace of my beloved medical research, I implemented a synchronized two-step workflow using Gemini. As the human researcher, I provided the raw natural intelligence driving the core scientific creativity, data interpretation, and verbal structural outlines in text mode. The AI's large language model LLM was then utilized in audio mode to refine the text, converting spoken ideas into precise medical prose and reading the drafts back aloud for seamless, sight-free proofreading. This powerful combination of a supercharged brain, clear auditory feedback, and targeted eye assistance has allowed me to overcome severe physical limitations, ensuring that my longitudinal research continues at an even higher level of productivity. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.